So in this video, let's talk about creating new documents and getting them set up so that you can work. From here, I've got nothing open, so I'm going to go to File and Create New. This may take a few moments to do, but this will give you all of the options you need to make a new document. Now, it does remember the last document size that you created, and if you look at the top, there are some predefined common document sizes. So for instance, if you wanted to work in photographs, these are some common photograph sizes. Common print sizes for working on letter or tabloid size pieces of paper. Even illustration and web sizes are all set up for over here. What we want to be able to do is to type in our own custom size. To do that, look over on the right-hand side of this new document. From here, you can type in the height or the width of your document and also what unit of measure you're working in. Now, if something's going to be printed, I highly recommend working in inches or centimeters or millimeters. If something's to be created just for the screen, very often you'll choose pixels. But do make sure you've got the correct unit of measure. Very often I'll tell somebody to make a 7 by 5 inch and they'll have 7 by 5 pixels selected and it's incorrect. So I've got inches selected. If I needed to quickly swap the height and the width, you can change the orientation from here. You can have multiple artboards and canvases to work on. By default, I'm going to keep this unchecked. We'll talk a little bit about that in a later lesson. An important thing to understand is the resolution you're working with. If you're going to get something printed or create something that you want to be printed, make sure your resolution is at least 300 pixels per inch. This is a good standard printing size. Of course, it can go up even higher. Typically, I like to keep my resolution between 300 and 600 pixels per inch. Now, if I'm making something that's even larger than this, it's going to take up more memory to work on and tends to bog down my system. It's also a little bit unnecessary, but it comes in handy if I need to make it much, much larger. If I'm making something for the screen, however, typically I keep that at 150 pixels per inch. Sometimes even smaller than that. But by default, 300 is a good resolution to keep your working area working in. Next, an important thing to know is the color mode you're working in. Now, Photoshop works on a digital platform and it needs to be able to show and use lots of different colors. By default, the computer screen that you have works in RGB color mode. This is red, green, and blue, and these are all of the colors that mix together to show you every color on your screen. RGB gives you the most color options to pick from. However, when you go to print your colors, your printer works in CMYK color mode. So if you're creating something that you know needs to be printed, it's typically good to work in CMYK as your color mode, and Photoshop will make the necessary adjustments for those colors. For me, I usually like working in RGB color mode, then later on I can swap over to CMYK and fix the colors that I created. The main takeaway for this, RGB can create colors that CMYK cannot print. So very often you'll get some nice vibrant colors from RGB, but when you go to print it, it tends to turn a little bit muted and a little bit dull. For the most part, I'll let you know what color mode we need to work in. There are some other kinds of color modes that tend to work depending on your situation. You can work just in grayscale. You can use lab colors or tile in exactly the colors that you want to be able to work from. RGB is going to be my set default. Photoshop does work in different bit rates. This tends to come in handy if you're creating graphics for games or for higher resolution interactive graphics. For the most part, we're always going to keep it at an 8-bit graphic. This way it doesn't overtax our system. When I create a document, I can give it a different background color. By default, white is what we can set it as, but you can choose black, you can choose transparent and keep it at nothing, or you can pick whatever custom color you want it to be. I'm going to make mine white and show you how to change this later on. Finally, under the advanced options, if you're ever working with a specific printer, very often they'll want you to choose a specific color profile so that the colors on your screen match the printers that they have. And this is where you can pick that color profile. Also, if you're creating graphics for television or for the web, you can change your pixel aspect ratio so that it matches theirs. These advanced options are a little more advanced than what we're going to get into, so I'm just going to keep those, but I wanted to make you aware of what that does. Now, if I say create, this is going to create my new document. You can see I've got my 5x7 document here. If necessary, you can turn on your rulers by going up to View, down to Show, and here's where I can show a lot of different things. For instance, I can show grids and guides. If I wanted to see my rulers, oh, here they are right here. Command R is set for this one. Now I got my little rulers on the top and the side of my document. If I need to change the size of my document, there's two different ways of thinking about this. First off, if I just want to have more area to work in, I can go up to Image, down to your canvas size. So this will change the size of the canvas area that I'm working on, my artboard, without actually making everything else bigger. With canvas size selected, here's where I can type in the exact size and dimensions that I want. Let's say I wanted to work, instead of a 5x7, let's do an 8x11. This will make it much larger, and I can even change the size or the background that I have, but I'm going to keep it at my default white and say OK to that. Now you can see this gives me a much larger document that I can work in and be able to work from here. If I was to change not the canvas size, but the image size, that's going to stretch everything out or make it much smaller. In general, the canvas size is what I want to be able to work in and to be able to give me more area to work. Another way you can quickly and easily change the work area that you're on is to use your crop tool. The crop tool is found at the top of your toolbox. Do make sure you got the regular default crop. With it selected, clear away any numbers that may be inside of here. I'm going to choose clear, and also make sure ratio is selected. You can set these to be a specific 1-to-1 type area. So if I was creating something for Instagram or I need it to be square, but if I set to ratio, this is where I can clear it away, and I can pull it out and make it whatever size that I need it to be. Notice when I click and drag, you can see the little W and the H that follow my cursor. It stands for the width and the height. And I can set that to be whatever size when I hit the return key or the checkbox, and set it to be whatever size document that I want. So that's kind of a fun, quick way of changing up the size of your document. Or again, you can go to Image, Canvas size, and you can dial in exactly what you want. Let's say I need it to be exactly 10 by 8.5. Say OK to that. Since this is smaller, I'll say Proceed, and it gives me exactly that particular document size and setup. The final thing to know, once you've set up your document, is go ahead and get into a habit of saving the document that you're working on. If we go up to File, down to Save, the default format you want to save everything as is your Photoshop document. Now this is going to save all of your layers, any of your settings that you have, any blending modes, everything that you've done will be saved as that Photoshop document. It'll also be a larger file. So Photoshop documents, because it's saving everything, tend to be large documents. But it does give you the full ability to edit it later. Some other types of documents, if you wanted to change the format, can be clicked on and chosen from here. Things like JPEG or even PNG or TIFFs, those are good for printing, but it will flatten your image and you'll get rid of all of your layers. You won't be able to make edits to that as well. So I usually save it as a Photoshop document first. We'll call this my test one. And that's what I'll work from later on. I can go up to File and Save As. And if I needed a JPEG version of this, because I'm doing a Save As, this will save a copy of it. And I can change it up to be a different format. In this case, it'll be a JPEG version of what I've got. Some of these do have extra options to them. This is where I can change, for instance, the size or the quality of my file. And when I say OK, that version is also now saved up as a different version as well. From here, the last thing I can do, if I need to close this out, is click up there. That will close down and return me to my basic Photoshop setting.